and about how the only thing that I could own in that moment when I was laying in a hospital bed was my attitude, because my body wasn't working. And because I did that, because I owned my attitude, I took ownership of how I was going to react to my injury. I was able to help, my mom, the most important person in my life, feel a little bit better. I was able to help her get through the most traumatic experience of her entire life, and then do everything else that we just talked about.
Yeah.
So own your attitude. Okay, well, yeah, it was a gym back in, still there, but it was it's a big gym back in 2008 when I got in the military. I was founded by this guy, Mark Twight, that was a climber. He was sort of like, Mark Twight was a little bit like Jocko for me before Jocko.
Really?
Really resonated with a lot of, he did a lot of writing, and he had the philosophy that really resonated with me. And, so yeah, it just really resonated with me. And so when I got the opportunity to go out there and train for triathlons, I took it.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. It's always a good place, but,
yeah, I mean, it's like Denver, except better.
I would say so. Yeah, we like it.
Closer to the mountains, less traffic.
Quiet. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, quiet. So, just got to deal with the inversion from time to time. No big deal.
That's true. But, well, right on. It looks like we're recording, and today we have a really special opportunity to have Rob Jones on this podcast. I've been talking about it for a couple weeks, just letting people know that you were coming on, and having people send me some questions to ask you and those kind of things. But really excited to have you on. It's an honor. And Rob, if you don't mind, just maybe introducing yourself, and then we can take the conversation from there. If that's okay.
Sure, man. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here as your guest. I'll give you a real brief introduction. I was in the Marine Corps from 2006 to 2011, combat engineer. So my job was finding improvised explosive devices for those little bombs that the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and those guys would put in the ground that, killed most of the service members that were killed over there. Did a deployment to Iraq and to Afghanistan. And in Afghanistan, I stepped on an IED in the process of trying to clear through an area that we suspected had IEDs in it. And that resulted in double above knee amputations of my legs, and recovered at Walter Reed for about a year and a half. And I was sort of forced to go on this journey of finding a new way to bring meaning and purpose to my life. And I turned to the world of sports to do that, because a lot of people don't expect disabled people to be able to do sports and let alone competitive sports and, high level endurance challenges. So I wanted to sort of use that disadvantage that I had now as an advantage to tell a story. Yeah. And so went to the Paralympics 2012, won a bronze medal, rode my bike across the country in 2013, and did this thing I call the monthly marathons, which is where you first, heard about me. In 2017, where I ran 31 marathons back to back, all in different cities around the country. And these days, I live in Northern Virginia, married with a son and a daughter on the way. And I do leadership instruction for Echelon Front.
That is the perfect introduction. I couldn't have said it better myself. Man. Yeah,
hitting the highlights.
There's a lot that we're going to cover in those things, and I think starting off though, I want to kind of go back a little bit. I did stalk your Instagram, and I got to know, what's an ice cold Rob?
Rob Jones?
I don't know. It said, you had I think
ice cold Rob Jones. Yeah, the Rob Jones is a drink.
Okay.
And what it is iced tea with either cream or a half and half or milk in it. Iced tea with half and half. And the reason I started doing that was because my wife's English, and so one of the first times I went over and spent time with her in England, she introduced me to the English way of drinking tea, which is black tea with milk in it.
Oh,
hot. Nice. And so, obviously, in America, we like iced tea, and I was living in Salt Lake City at the time, or I was living in Charlottesville at the time, and in the summertime, it's just so hot, and I couldn't imagine drinking hot tea in the summer in Charlottesville, Virginia, so I just started drinking iced tea, and I thought, well, what if I drank iced tea in the English way? And so I started adding half and half and milk to my iced tea, and I think it's delicious. And most people most people, when they hear about it, they say, "Oh, that's kind of gross," but then when they try it, they think it's pretty good.
Well, if you
So
ever
whenever
come
I
out
go
to
to
Salt Lake,
restaurants, whenever I go to restaurants, I order a Rob Jones, and they're like, "What's that?" And I have to tell them what it is. But
I
hopefully,
like it.
over time, if I do that enough, we'll start seeing it on some menus.
I'll support that. I'll get the message out there. That's one of the
Yeah,
goals of this. You know?
I'm on Salt Lake, we'll go to Feldman's and we'll have an ice cold Rob Jones.
There we go. All right, well, right on. I do want to ask you though a little bit about your childhood and kind of how your work ethic and discipline came into play. That's a big thing that I try and talk a lot about on this podcast is like discipline, and Jocko talks about it. He's the one that kind of got me on that journey myself. And as like growing up, how did you start to understand the value of hard work? Because you are someone who has a track record of it.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on a farm, so I grew up doing a lot of cleaning out horse stalls and weed whacking, stacking hay bales, mowing the lawn, mowing just, huge swaths of grass.
Yeah.
Just doing farm work in general, building fences, that kind of thing. And so I don't know if I was really cognizant enough or intelligent or I guess wise enough at that time to really recognize the value of what I was doing. I never really wanted to do it, even though it was funding my childhood.
Yeah.
Earn money. But in retrospect, yeah, obviously having to go out in all manner of climate, all manner of weather, and get a job done and do it until it's done right. I mean, that's it's the foundation of a good work ethic, and it's the foundation of a good attitude. And so, luckily, I had to do all that and kind of get used to that kind of thing before I joined the Marine Corps and before I got wounded.
I mean, that's good training for the Marine Corps. Like I've had to clean out horse stalls myself and do
Made
all
me
those
hate
things.
horses, but yeah.
Yeah, it's not fun, but it definitely puts some hair on your chest, as they say. So, no,
Yeah.
that's interesting. And then, how old were you when you decided to join the Marine Corps?
I think I was about 20. So it was after my junior year at Virginia Tech when I joined.
And that was that just like, I don't want to do farm work anymore. I want to try something new, or was there something a little bit? Did you have a history with the Marine Corps or anything?
Not really. I mean, I only did the farm stuff when I was a teenager in high school. That was my family's farm. And when I went down to Virginia Tech, I was a computer science student. And I wasn't a very good student, and I just wasn't doing well in college, and I wasn't particularly outgoing, so I didn't have a whole lot of friends, and eventually got to a point where I realized that my dream probably wasn't going to happen, and so I was searching for something else to bring. Yeah, I was just in a position in my life where I just didn't really feel like I was making any sort of contribution to the world, and so I started looking for a way that I could do that, and I found the Marine Corps because a friend had joined the Marine Corps the year before, and so I researched it and read a couple books about it, and figured that joining the Marine Corps would be a good way to have a meaningful life.
Yeah, I've spoken to a few Marines, Dakota Meyer being one of them, and he would talk about the brotherhood that the Marines share. What was that like? Like, is it just right out the gate, you guys all bond together, or is it like take a few months for you guys to become good buddies?
No, it takes time. I mean, yeah, it takes time. I mean, the second you meet somebody, just because you're both Marines doesn't mean that you're going to be the closest. Wouldn't necessarily mean that you'd be calling the other guy brother in a real meaningful sense of the word.
Yeah.
I call other Marines brother just because we're in the same brotherhood. We're in the Marine Corps brotherhood. So, any Marine typically is going to be higher up on my list of people that I would want to talk to. But any particular Marine, I wouldn't necessarily say that they're my best friend by default. So, yeah, it takes time. And the more time you spend together, the more difficult things you do together. And then eventually when it gets to war, that's where you really form the brotherhood, the camaraderie, where you're blood brothers for life. It's when you go to war, because obviously that's the most difficult thing that a human being can take part in. And so when two people or multiple people go through the most difficult circumstances that humans can experience, then that's going to form a very strong brotherhood between those people.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine that, and I can only like get glimpses of it from reading stories like yours or reading books like what Jocko does. But it seems like it's something that lasts forever. That camaraderie.
Yeah, certainly. It definitely does.
Do you mind kind of sharing what your experience was like on your first deployment? I know you went out first time in 2008, correct?
Yeah, 2008 Habaniya, Iraq. And the war in Iraq at that point was sort of on the downswing, was slowing down a lot. And so our primary role there was to build Iraqi police stations and go out into the city of Habaniya and find and dispose of buried weapons caches that had been left behind by Al Qaeda or whoever was in the area. And so they would stockpile mortars, artillery rounds, machine guns, grenades, things, all their weapons. They would bury them in the city.
Yeah.
And so obviously when they got forced out, they didn't take all that stuff with them, but we wanted to make that city nice and safe for the local populace. So they would usually call us up, or they let us know that they were aware of a particular place that they thought had had one of these weapons caches. And so the infantry unit that I was with, a squad would patrol out to that area, secure it, and then me and this other engineer would go through with our metal detector and find it, uncover it, and then usually explosive ordnance disposal would come and either blow it in place or take it away and to be blown up somewhere else.
Okay, so that was pretty much the entire first deployment, correct?
Yeah, that was 7 months of doing pretty much that, just doing a lot of cache sweeps, finding a lot of buried weapons. No
And
real,
then,
combat or anything like that.
yeah, well, that's good. When you met back in 2010, you were tasked with finding IEDs, right? And then like, what was it? What was a typical day with that? How many would you uncover, or is there anything like that you could share about that deployment a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously in 2010, Afghanistan was picking back up in its intensity, and the Taliban they didn't have buried leftover military munitions, because the leftover munitions from Iraq were from the Iran-Iraq War, so there were a lot of these military munitions. So the Taliban, what they like to do is they would just make homemade explosives and they'd put it in plastic jugs, and they'd add fuel oil or they'd add aluminum to make a bigger fireball. And since the war over there was picking back up, we were going into areas that had previously been uncontested. There were a lot more IEDs present. And so typically we would just be going on a mission, and anytime we felt that we had discovered an area where there was a good likelihood that there was an improvised explosive device in there, then I would go through and find a clear path through that area. So like a good example of this would be if we were going to cross a river and we had to go across a bridge in order to go across that river, then typically the Taliban would like to put their IEDs on either side of that bridge. So every time we went over that bridge, I would go through with a metal detector and clear it, make sure there was or I would find a safe path through that bridge, across that bridge. I would mark it with something, and then everybody else would follow that exact same path that I had just walked.
Holy cow.
So that's how it would work.
Yeah.
And so we were doing a lot of sweeping, I would probably sweep for something, most days that we were out, because we were constantly coming across these little choke points.
Yeah. And how long did you do that until you got injured?
So that deployment was about I made it 4 months into that deployment.
Okay.
And the area that we were in at first, a place called Delamram, was pretty pacified. So there wasn't a whole lot. We weren't doing tons and tons of sweeping there, but then when we got to Sangin, which was we were starting to take previously uncontested Taliban territory, we were seizing that from them. That's when we were finding, that's where most of the IEDs were.
Holy cow. And then I've heard you talk a little bit about the day that you were injured, and you say you woke up and like it felt a little different. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean that's a very good way to put it. I woke up at site of injury probably 20 seconds after I was stepped on the IED, and it was like it was a lot like what you see in the movies where the guy is screaming his head off. And for me, it was like I'd been detached. My consciousness had been detached and set aside somewhere, put in like a little box or something over here. The only thing I was really aware of were I had my awareness, but I wasn't really. I was aware that my body was doing things, but I wasn't telling it to do those things. So it was screaming, but I wasn't really telling it to. It was. That was pretty much the only thing I was doing. Actually, was screaming, but I wasn't telling my body to do that. I was it was as if my consciousness was just sort of a passive bystander. But over the course of the next minute and a half, my body regained its faculties, and I was able to start thinking and controlling my body again. And then my fellow Marines came over, put tourniquets on. They called in a helicopter and loaded me onto a stretcher, and they took me to this tank, and then they gave me another shot of morphine, and I went unconscious.
Okay, and then you went to remind me the recovery place or the hospital, right?
So I went to, I think, Camp Leatherneck first.
Okay.
And then to Bagram Air Force Base, and then to Landstuhl, Germany, and then Bethesda, Maryland was where I ended up. And then after a month at Bethesda, Maryland, I got transferred over to Walter Reed Army Medical Center.
Okay. And is that where you had the pirate hat?
At Bethesda is when I did so on the way back, even though I was barely conscious the entire time, on the way back, I woke up briefly, and I just had this thought that my mom was going to be, rather upset when she heard the news about what happened to me. So I asked my nurse to try and find me a funny or a stupid looking hat or something that I could wear for when I got back, thinking that, if the first time she saw me that I was wearing some sort of stupid hat or something, she wouldn't be able to help but laugh, and that would make her feel just a little bit better. And that was pretty much the only thing I could do in that situation to help the person that I cared about the most. But they could, they didn't have a funny hat available in, a trauma hospital in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
But word had gotten back, or I said something. I forget exactly how. I don't know exactly how word got to my mom, but she arranged for a pirate hat to be given to me. She had a pirate hat for me.
That's like I love that. I think having a sense of humor in all aspects of your life is super important, but that's like next level. And the reason I say that is like, even in your most dire situation, you're still thinking about other people, and like you're trying to make them have a positive life, right? Like,
yeah. And I think that there's something to be said there, because I wasn't conscious. I didn't consciously have that. I was conscious, but I wasn't really thinking clearly. I wasn't cognizant at that point. So I think that me asking for the hat was this sort of primal reaction that came down from the foundation of my psyche. And I think that's why I always say, when the thing that gives human beings the most strength in life is a selfless purpose, something they're doing for somebody that they care about more than themselves. And I think that that's sort of evidence for that, because I was able to do this sort of powerful act without having this conscious mind to really think about it and sit there and go, what can I do in this situation? I just kind of did it because that was this instinctual act that I could do that came down from, it just came out of my most primal brain.
Yeah. That's admirable. And you have evidence of that throughout your, you talk about it after you rode you rode across America, you talked about like, you needed something else, and you felt like that was, because it was more of a selfish act, which, or not selfish. It was all about you, but
yeah, the core principle, the underlying drive behind it was more about me pushing myself, seeing what I was capable of, seeing what I could do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I would say that I was raising money for veteran charities, so it wasn't 100%, all about me, but the underlying force behind it was about, pushing myself.
Yeah.
And so that's why I didn't feel it. That's why for the vast majority of the time, I just felt unsettled.
Yeah. And it makes sense. Like you said it, like selfless acts are kind of what make life like good in my opinion, at least, or joyful is, when you start thinking about yourself too much, it can be dangerous at times. I feel like, and
It can last you for a little bit, but I don't think that that's really the way to a meaningful and happy life.
yeah, I agree with that. But as you started to recover, that's a time when I think it's okay to think about yourself, right, and push past the
I
feelings.
mean, nobody blame you. I don't think anybody would blame you, but I don't think it's going to be the ideal path.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would ever get mad at anybody for thinking about themselves when they're in the hospital. But if you can think about somebody else and think about why your recovery is important to them, why they're relying upon your recovery, then that's going to give you the greatest strength and make your recovery even more impactful and more and better. So yeah, you could think about yourself, sure, but I don't think it's the best way.
So how did you keep? Did you struggle with having a positive attitude when you were starting the recovery process? Because I'm trying to put myself, in just a situation like that, and I don't know how I would be, and it's kind of a scary thought, to be honest. Like, I don't know what my mindset would be like if I would just be, that way. But I don't know. Can you talk about some of the feelings that you went through as you started to, go through PT again to get physical training back up, and some of your thoughts in the hospital, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I mean, when I woke up at site of injury, I was asking guys to just go ahead and finish me off, man, because I don't want to live in a wheelchair forever. My mom's probably gonna have to take care of me like a baby. I don't want to have to do that. So, dude, just finish me off. And of course they didn't, and that was a very naive picture of what life as a disabled person is, or life as a double above knee amputee is like. And I was also going into shock and everything. But by the time I woke up in that hospital bed in Germany, that whole mindset had shifted. And I think throughout recovery, from that point on, I really never struggled with any sort of mindset challenges or attitude problems. I always was able to just say to myself, well, my heart's beating, my lungs are breathing, they're going to keep doing that. And so I don't want to be living in the past. I still want my life to be awesome. I want my life to be happy. I want to be a happy person. I want to do something that makes an impact. I want to do something meaningful. And so as long as you remember that that's sort of your main goal in life, that is your main goal in life, is to have a meaningful life and have a happy life. And so as long as you remember that that is your ultimate objective, you can get there from any number of different ways. You can find very many different paths to get to that end place. And so ultimately I sort of had that realization that I want to get there, and there's more than one way to get there. So I just had to find how to get there.
Yeah, that's, again, I look to people like you anytime I'm feeling sorry for myself, and the example that you said of just exactly what you said, being happy in all circumstances. I was just showing my wife on Instagram, you have all these different video clips of you saying how to look tough when you're hanging laundry, and it's you put on your C4 satchel bag and you turn on. Oh man, I can't remember who the metal artist is, but little videos
Lamb
like that.
Of God.
Lamb of God. There you go.
Yeah, my favorite.
Or it's put on your legs and get riding, and you're on a quad. It's awesome stuff, and it's just I think that's such a good example of, what, this is life. This is what happened to me, but I'm going to make the most of it. And I try and make that, a part of my life to emulate that spirit almost, and make sure that I can, uplift others if I can, or other things like that. But for someone, to start looking outside of themselves, and maybe someone has a goal to maybe they want to serve once a day, or try and help more people. How would you say to what's a good way to not focus on yourself?
I think it's just a matter about taking a step back and figuring out who you care about more than yourself. Who in your life do you care about more than yourself? What cause do you care about more than yourself? Or what place do you care about? Or what mission do you care about, such that you would sacrifice yourself for it, for them, for another person. So whether that's your wife or your child or your mom or your dad or your friend or whoever it is. And you don't necessarily have to sacrifice your life or whatever, but somebody that you're willing to sacrifice for, make sacrifices for, whether it's your time, your energy, money, whatever it is. Figure out who those people are and then ask yourself what they need and how can my circumstances help get them what they need? How can I use my circumstances to help get them what they need? So in my predicament in the early days in the hospital, my mom needed to know that I was going to be fine. She needed to know that I was going to be okay. And so I became okay. And I had a positive attitude and I worked my butt off to get, back on my feet. And that was what was best for her. What was best for her was for me to have a positive attitude and not let this injury destroy my life.
Yeah.
And so when woke up in the morning and I felt tired or I felt like I didn't want to work out or I didn't go to PT or I was feeling like this situation sucked, I would think about that. And I would think about her needing it and my dad and my family and my friends and my fellow Marines that were back in Afghanistan still. All of them needed me to be okay. And so that's what gave me the strength to do the things that I was supposed to be doing because I knew that they were relying on me to do those things in order to have what they needed. I needed to get up and go to PT and do these difficult things because they needed me to do it in order for them to know that I was going to be okay.
Man, I love that. Dropping knowledge bombs, Ron. I appreciate it.
So I know that you were just talking about discipline, and that to me, that is the source of discipline. So for example, when people ask Jocko, how do you get up at 4:30? He says, set your alarm. When your alarm goes off at 4:30, you get out of bed. And that's what discipline is. And to me, the source of that discipline, the source of what gives you the energy to get out of the bed is that selfless reason that you need to get out of the bed that day. I need to get out of the bed so I can go exercise so that I can live into my 90s and be a part of my grandkids' lives, my kids' lives, my great grandkids' lives.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, thanks for saying that. Because I do the same thing. Jocko, he made that part of my life, waking up that early and getting out of bed just so I can go exercise, because it's the only time I've found that I can really do it and take care of myself in that way. You can look at, some people look at exercise as like a selfish act sometimes if you're spending hours and hours in the gym, but I just try and go to where I'm healthy and I can maintain myself. And I figure, if I'm able to do that, then I can, like you said, take care of the people around me and support them, show up to work and give my best there too, and do all these different things. But I love that. You got to have your why. Everyone talks about, what is your why? And I think if you make that why outside yourself, it's a little bit easier to maintain that discipline, like you said, and take care of the other people around you that you care about and love.
Yeah, it can't be all about everybody else. You can take it to the extreme where you're doing things purely for other people and you're not doing things that you enjoy, and that's going to put a strain on you. So if you can combine something that you enjoy with something that benefits other people, that's kind of the best situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll talk more about that actually a little bit later during this, but I do want to circle back. You said, you're working your butt off in PT and doing all these things, and it's clear that you did, because in 2012 you were in the Paralympic Games, right, for rowing, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was that team rowing or was that just single?
That was a double. So it was
okay.
me and a partner, so named Oksana, and we did trunk and arms. So just arms and back, but the seat was affixed to the boat.
So you were just jacked, just looking like Arnold.
I wasn't huge, but I wasn't small either.
Yeah,
I wasn't Brian Shaw.
I wasn't Brian Shaw. Shout out to Brian Shaw. We got to get him on this podcast. But what was that like? Just that fanfare, all that stuff. That must have been a pretty different environment from what you were used to.
Yeah, sort of. it's interesting because doing PT for a year and a half, I basically was living the life of an athlete. I
Yeah.
was going in every day and I was working out for 4 or 5 hours every day, Monday to Friday, because
Okay.
they were closed Saturday and Sunday. And that's what my life was about, was just going in and doing the physical exercise to get walking in. And that's all training was for the Paralympics too. It was training twice a day and then doing nothing else but train and then do all the stuff that facilitates that training. So getting enough sleep, eating the right foods, not doing things that are going to hurt your training session the next day.
Yeah.
And so I sort of had already been living the life of an athlete for about a year and a half at that point. And then so the 9 months training for the Paralympics were challenging for sure, but I was sort of already used to it in that I had already been living that lifestyle. And then the Paralympics itself, yeah, it was an incredible experience. You're basically a celebrity for a week and a half. And just the competition was nerve wracking and yeah, I mean, it was incredible.
That's
And obviously being able to get a medal was, made it a lot better.
yeah. It came out with the bronze. That's intense.
Yeah, and if we had another year to train, then I think we probably would have gotten a gold, but we only had those 9 months. And so we did pretty dang good going from having never met before to a little less than a year later, bronze medalist. So
Yeah, that's amazing. What was like the finish times like? Like, what was the difference between them? Like seconds or milliseconds, or you know what I'm
seconds,
saying? Like,
yeah.
okay,
So first place was 3:57 for 1,000 meters.
holy cow.
And then was it three? Maybe it was like 3:54 or 3:55 or something like that. And then second place was 4 minutes. We came in at 4:01 point like one, and then Great Britain came in at 4:01.3. So we beat them by
Dang.
0.2 of a second.
There we go. USA.
It was quite a hair raising race for bronze there.
That's intense. Holy cow. So you finish
Yeah.
that, and then you make the shift to where you're like, you know what? I got to challenge myself again. How'd you get the idea to like cycle across America?
When I was in recovery, I was drawn to these endurance athletes, ultra endurance athletes, because I thought that was really something that made people push their mind and their body to the utmost. People that did 100-mile races, or I found out about the race across America where you start in wherever in like Oceanside, California, and you race to Annapolis, and just whoever gets there first. So it's like a 5 or 6 day race, and people are
Yeah.
hallucinating and all this stuff, sleeping an hour a day. And I really admired that. And so that sort of got me into endurance, ultra endurance things. And also during that time period, I was trying to become one of the first double above knee amputees to learn how to ride a bicycle. Nobody in the hospital had done it. And there was one other amputee, double above knee amputee, that I knew of that was able to ride a regular bicycle. And so that was sort of I wanted to be able to ride a bike again because I'd been getting into mountain biking before my injury. And it was just something that I wanted to be able to do. And it was sort of an extra challenge for myself to, do something that nobody in the clinic had done before. And it was a little puzzle. And so it was this fun little thing that I was trying to do. And I eventually figured it out. And when I did that, I said, man, I put so much time into doing this. I should ride my bike across the country or something like that, just to, use this skill. And so I did the Paralympics for a couple, and then I did rowing for a couple of years. And then eventually I realized that rowing wasn't really going to be a long-term thing for me, for the same reason that I talked about with the bike ride earlier. It just wasn't really, and it just felt like rowing was mostly about me seeking glory and me trying to win a race every year. And so it didn't really, I knew it didn't have a lot of time in my life. And so during that second rowing season, I started planning this cross-country bike ride to see, what that would be like.
So what was it like? What was like? You finally decide, hey, we're gonna do this thing. I know you had a was it a van or a bus that followed you to like for the support vehicle and that kind of thing?
A U-Haul. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
My
Even
little
better.
my little brother Steve, who was 18, drove a U-Haul, 17-foot U-Haul, and we had sort of done it up on the inside of the box. We were was living in a Sprinter van before that became a cliche thing that everybody does now. But we kind of made it all nice in there. And started in Bar Harbor, Maine, finished in Camp Pendleton, California. It took about 181 days. Started in October, finished in April, so I had to do it through the winter time,
Holy cow.
which got me to the Colorado Rockies in February. Had to go over Monarch Pass with giant snowdrifts on either side.
Oh,
Freezing cold, was very cold, very monotonous. A lot of wind. Yeah, it was frustrating at times. A lot of fun at times. Like I hit southern Utah in March, I guess. But right when I hit it, it was a warm spell. So I was in this 100-mile stretch of southern Utah, all the red rocks and everything, no towns,
yeah.
barely any cars, riding through the red rocks of Utah, which is really cool. So a lot of stuff like that. But there was also days where I was hitting ice and not making much progress and fighting wind in Nevada. And so it was really cool.
Yeah, that's intense. So, like, if you don't mind me asking, how did that work with your legs? Like, did you have specific attachments or?
Yeah, I had a specific set of prosthetics that I used.
And did they
Called
make
the
it
Bartlett
custom?
tendon. My left one was a custom, and then the right one was a leg that is just a manufactured leg called the Bartlett tendon that this guy Brian Bartlett invented when he became an amputee and he wanted to be able to ride a mountain bike.
Holy cow! And those days when you were a little bit more discouraged, maybe when the wind was pushing a little bit harder or it was super cold, you're in the Rocky Mountains. What did you tell yourself to keep going?
I think I knew there would be an end to the day. I knew that no matter how hard the wind blew, eventually I would get to a point where I would be done for the day, and I just had to get to the next kilometer or the next mile or the next top of the next hill or make it the next hour or whatever the case may be. Yeah. And I knew that I would finish that day, and then I'd get a new day the next time I woke up.
And on that same note, what was your average miles per day?
I started at like 30 miles and ended at about 35. And my goal actually was to start at 30 and then continuously increase the distance as I went.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of do a couple of challenges where I wanted to see if I could ride 100 miles in a day or see how far I could get in 24 hours. But the fundraising part of it started to take over a little bit more as I got further on. And so I would have to be stopping more often to do sort of interviews and receptions where I was trying to raise money and trying to get the story out there a little bit more. So that basically capped my distance at 35 that I could do, because we were planning out all these things day after day after day at the end of it. So I would ride and then do an interview, and I couldn't be 150 miles that way.
Yeah.
When I was supposed to be at this certain spot to do an interview.
That's insane. Holy cow. Yeah, I can't even imagine that. That's wild. So you did it in how many days? Remind me, sorry.
It was 181.
181 days. Okay. And then you finished the race. What was that like? You're like, what's next?
Yeah, that was a big question. I mean, I didn't really know what I was going to do next. Hadn't really thought about it. But yeah, I knew what I wanted to do next was go see my girlfriend at the time, Pam, who I met at the Paralympics in England. And I wanted to see her. And then obviously she became my wife. But I don't really only thought ahead that much. And then when I was in England visiting her, that's when I started to think about what I wanted to try next, which was trying to go to the Paralympics and do triathlon.
Yeah, that's insane. So did you ever do a triathlon?
Yeah, I did it for 2 years.
Okay.
Moved to Salt Lake and started training with this guy, Bobby Maximus. And he also did my strength training for rowing. And he basically wrote my training program for triathlon. And
nice.
I was trying to make the Paralympics, but I was trying to do it in a way that most people wouldn't do it as a double above knee amputee, because most double above knee amputees would be in this category called PT1, where it was sort of this category where the double above knee amputees were meant to be. And then there was a category called PT2, which was more for single above knee amputees and other people with sort of quote unquote similar disabilities. but the PT1 category, you rode a hand cycle for the bike, and you did a racing wheelchair for the run. But I could run using running prostheses, and I could ride a bicycle, so I didn't want to do that. So I decided to try and do it in this PT2 category where I would have to race against single above knee amputees. And it didn't, I mean, I got crushed. I trained as hard as I could, but I just couldn't overcome I would crush them on the run, actually.
Really? You're faster on the run.
I was faster on the run. They crushed me on the bike. They crushed me on the swim. So, 1 out of 3 isn't good enough. But I would usually, my run time for a 5K was about 18 minutes.
That's insane! Holy cow! I know people who can't do that now on 2 healthy legs, so that's very impressive.
Yeah, well, and so that's kind of what led me into the next thing, the month of marathons, because I rediscovered this natural talent that I'd always had for running. I mean, I was running at Salt Lake City's 5,000 feet. I was able to do an 18-minute 5K at 5,000 feet, and with really only running twice a week, and so I rediscovered that talent.
Man, so that's kind of where, like, I think I mentioned a little bit to you that I'm getting into running myself. I started not too long ago, probably about 3 years ago. I started getting into running. I got sick for a while, so I had to stop. My body weight dropped down. Where do I run?
Yeah,
I try and run just outside as much as I can here in Utah.
No, but I mean, like, where in Utah? In Salt Lake or?
Yeah, this little city called Lehi, Utah. So there's like a lot of hills and stuff, and I figure it's good cardio, so it gets me going.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would go out to this place called the Great Salt Air, and that's where I would do my time trials, my running and my bike time trials, because it's perfectly flat. It's along the Salt Lake.
Oh, nice! I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, I mean, pretty cool little spot to run in if you want to go. Just you want just something that's pretty much perfectly flat.
But I kind of got into running for that same reason, that it like challenged me on a level that I never really felt before. And obviously mine running can't compare to yours at all. Yeah. I'm nowhere near your level. But that's like one of the messages I talk about on this podcast. This past week, I launched like a series that's only talking about running for people who are looking to get into it or looking to like follow kind of what I do. I'm training for a sub 3 in February in honor of like my wife's dad who passed away from cancer. But like it's definitely an experience, and like I know how difficult it is to recover from longer runs. I ran my first marathon in June, and like, I had blisters on my feet, and I've heard you talk about some of the recovery pieces to running. But before we get into that and things like that, do you mind telling me where you got your idea for 31 marathons in 31 days in 31 cities?
Yeah, so I just failed to do triathlon. I think I just quit. I realized that I was never going to qualify for the Paralympics, so I decided to pack it in. And so I was just sort of riding my bike around my neighborhood thinking about, what am I going to do now? And I had recently been following this guy, the Iron Cowboy, where he did the 50 Ironmans in 50 states in 50 days. So I thought maybe I wonder if I could do something like that. And I figured, all right, well, maybe I'll just run a bunch of marathons back to back, because I had run the Marine Corps Marathon the year before, and I had rediscovered that natural talent for running. So I just had that thought. It just popped in my head. And another part of it was I've realized in the last few years since I got out of the hospital that the perception around veterans was starting to shift in such a way that I didn't like it. When we started the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, all veterans were seen as these noble heroes. And then by 2015, 16, when this happened, I started to see that a lot of veterans are sort of being seen as the broken heroes now. Every movie, every TV show, every book, every news article or news story was about this veteran that was on the cusp of self-implosion and couldn't handle anything that they had seen in war.
Or addiction issues and stuff. I think I know what you're saying.
Hitting their wives, they're going crazy. Every single one of them has the 1,000-yard stare, and they're always talking about how much PTSD they have. And I recognize that was something that can't happen to people. and it's an important story for people to know of. But it wasn't the representative of me, and it wasn't representative of the vast majority of my friends, and it wasn't representative of the vast majority of veterans in general. I think 7% of combat veterans struggle with PTSD. That's it. And I wanted to do something to change that perception because I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And so my solution for that was to run all these marathons, and in doing so, I would be creating a story that would show the other side of that coin. And just put a positive story about a veteran out there so that people could see not all veterans go over to war and then come back and are destroyed by it.
I love that. It's something that I would love to help out too with that message. I don't know if you know who Debbie Lee. Have you met her? You've met her.
Yeah, I know Mama Lee.
But I would go over and help her with her Christmas lights, and she would tell me stories about her son and all these things. And everything was positive. And she always had positive things to say. And from the stories that she would tell me about him, is always in a positive light. And veterans do have to face some very, very dark things out there. That's thank you guys for keeping us almost segmented from it over here, but you protect us. And I think what you're doing is very noble with trying to portray that message. But if you don't one cool thing I remember you talking about on at least Jocko's podcast is the camaraderie that you were able to have people show up in these cities and run with you. And sometimes there's a track, right? And what was that like, just having people come out to support and run these things with you?
Yeah, it was awesome. Most of the marathons I would do would be on trails or something where I would park somewhere, park my RV at a trail spot or at a police station or a school close to the trail. And I would run, 2.5 kilometers to the right, 2.5 kilometers to the left. And I'd just go back and forth like that and stay in that little area. Just so I would be close to the RV if I needed anything. If I needed water, food, go to the bathroom, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then also if somebody wanted to come run with me, it was a lot easier for them just to find the RV and wait for me to come back. And then they could hop in.
That's great.
So a lot of people did that. I had pretty much people running with me every single marathon. Most of the time, at least 12 people. The one in DC, the last one, probably 200. A lot of people. And it was awesome. I really got a lot of strength out of the other people that ran with me.
Yeah. I think there's something to that too, like the community aspect of running. I've talked about it a few times on this, and that's actually one of the main reasons I've gotten into it myself is this race that my wife and her family put on every year is they call it Team Tim in honor of her dad that passed away. But it started just her brother, and a family friend. And now, this past January, we had 55 people show up. And then our goal is next February 10th, which is when we're running it. So if you want to come, it's in Mesa, Arizona. I'll buy your ticket.
Mesa. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's just, there's something about coming together and running for a cause. And it sounds like, you were able to really show up for the veterans that, are in your community who get a bad rap. And, I think it's really admirable, and I think it's a cool story to tell.
Thanks, man. Yeah. When you're doing something for something, that's when the inevitable barriers get in your way, relying on that motivation for why you're doing what you're doing. That's what gets you through those barriers.
Yeah. How'd you recover every day? And what was that like?
Well, first off, I prepared for a year and a half. I trained for a year and a half for it on top of the 2 years of triathlon, the bike ride, and the rowing. So I, had a lot of training under my belt up to that point already.
Yeah.
And I ran them in a way that I wouldn't get overexerted on any given marathon. I wasn't running all of them for time. Okay. I was running them for completion. So I would run at a purely aerobic heart rate. So I wouldn't let my heart rate go over 150 beats per minute. So I was staying purely aerobic. And that prevented my body from using carbohydrates as much as it could. And that meant there was a lot less breakdown of my body as I ran. because carbohydrates, when you use them for energy, they produce a lot of byproducts. So I ran at a slow pace, and then I would also just run in small chunks. So I'd run 12 kilometers and take 20-minute break, 12 kilometers, 20-minute break, 9.2 kilometers, 20-minute break, and then 9 kilometers. And I just kind of maintained my discipline when it came to making sure that my legs weren't getting blisters on them and stuff like that. I put chamois cream on them, and I'd make sure I dried them off and that kind of thing.
And then you'd go into the RV at night and eat a full cheesecake. I remember that.
I wouldn't eat cheesecake. I would eat this cheese sauce, meat and cheese sauce. Yeah, like the innards of a lasagna without the noodles.
There you go.
It was delicious, and I poured over a bag of pork rinds. So yeah, eating was a big part of it too. And then my mom would give me two massages every day. Yeah, so really I was just running and resting. That's it.
Yeah, that's crazy though. Like, I can't even think about that myself. Like, that just sounds intense.
Well, maybe one of these days you run a marathon and then run another one the next day.
Well, I'll try. Maybe
or just start by running a marathon and then next day go out and run 2 miles or something like that. Just prove to yourself that you can go out and run the next day.
Yeah, I mean that's all it is like finding that evidence and that proof in yourself, and that's one actually the main messages of this podcast is like, go do something difficult and then build on that. You know, it's
I mean, when you were training for your marathon, you didn't go out and just run 26.2 miles day one.
True.
You ran 1 mile, and then you said, okay, I can run a mile. If I can run 1 mile, then maybe I can run 2. And you went out and ran 2. And then, okay, if I can run 2, maybe I can run 5. If I can run 5, maybe I can run 10. If I can run 10, maybe 13. If I can run 13, maybe I can do 20. If I can run 20, I can do 26. And then you go run 26, and then you can say, well, maybe if I can run 26 today, maybe I can go out and run another one tomorrow, 1 day tomorrow, or 1 mile tomorrow. And just go from there.
I love it. It's all about testing your limits. And you,
progressive overload.
Yeah, you are the epitome of what that means to test your limits. I think, you know, nothing's off the table. And I think that's a trait that not a lot of people have, and I respect it. And
thanks, man.
It's something that is pretty awesome to see. If you don't mind me asking, what's like the biggest lesson or takeaway from that 31 marathon journey?
From that specific journey, I mean, I would say it was the selflessness stuff that I was talking about earlier, because that's when I really figured out that when you're doing something for a selfless purpose, that's when you can bring together. That's where you can give yourself the greatest strength that you can possess, and then also be happy while you do something really, really, really incredibly difficult.
Yeah. Because
the bike ride, I wasn't, I did it, and I'm proud of it, but I wasn't particularly happy during the most of it. I was sort of, when things got hard, I was like, God, why is this so hard? Even though I wanted it to be hard.
Yeah.
But then on the month of marathons, it was, every day was this incredibly challenging thing. But I loved it because I was doing it for a purpose that was bigger than me. I was doing it for a selfless purpose. And so, and when things got hard near the end, the strength came from the fact that the veteran community was relying on me to get this story out there. And I still loved it because I was doing it for that purpose, even though it really sucked at the end.
Yeah. I mean, that's something I try and do, and I'm trying to get better at that too, is like looking outside myself for larger purposes like that. Like I'm a man of faith, and so I always try and serve in my church community, and then serve my family and all these things. But yeah, that's pretty cool. And now you are doing that again. You're giving back to the community. As of like June 15th, you took on a role at Echelon Front, correct?
Yeah, I was. I'm lucky enough that they brought me on board the team, and I've been able to go around teaching the leadership principles from Echelon Front the last. Yeah, I think since June is when I officially came aboard.
Yeah. So, like, what do you typically go teach to, like, an organization, or like what's like the main thing that you try and cover within your first brief?
Usually it'll depend on what they ask for. But if we're doing the leadership brief, if they're asking for a keynote, for example, if this is the first time we've ever been with them, then I would go out and I would teach the 4 laws of combat, the mindsets for victory. And those are sort of the foundational principles of leadership. We're teaching them the core leadership principles, and then we're teaching them the tools that leaders need to have in order to be a good leader, and then also the mindsets that they need to have in order to be a good leader. And then we'll answer some questions. And then if they want more, then we have half-day workshops, full-day workshops where we go into more depth in each one of these different areas.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. From your own experience, just in the past, like what, 4 months it's been, have you taken anything away, like any big lessons learned from just being a part of that team and learning with them?
I mean, I've learned mostly about myself how much I thrive in a team environment. I mean, I'm learning things from them on a daily basis, just about being a better instructor, about leadership, and about the principles that we teach, and how to do this job that I'm lucky enough to be able to do. But just from an internal perspective, I was doing motivational speaking before I came on board at Echelon Front, and it was all right. I enjoyed it, but I've just realized that I'm the type of person that really thrives when I'm on a team. Yeah. And I could never do another motivational speaking gig again, as far as I'm concerned. If I could keep doing Echelon Front, teaching leadership with this team, that's what I would want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that, and like, I can't imagine what it would be like to be a part of that team. I owe a lot of like who I think I am because of the principles taught by Jocko and Leif and everyone else like that. Jamie. I even had Danny Ziem. He's the one that he came on this podcast first and kind of shared his experience. And now my goal is to get everyone from the Echelon Front team on this podcast at one point. So if you can, make some referrals, that'd be awesome.
I'll let them know.
Yeah. Hey, I'll send you this recording. You can blast it out. But yeah, there's something to like what they teach, and all the principles are simple. I mean, that is one of the laws of combat, is keep things simple. Mm-hmm. And it really comes down to, like you said, being a part of a team and being part of something bigger than yourself, because, it's a slippery slope when you start thinking about, hey, what can I get, or what can I receive from, X, Y, and Z. Like, you could honestly, like, if you wanted to, you could probably take, your motivational speaking to, who knows what, like an international level maybe. But to that point, like, it would just be, kind of hard to get excited about, at least from my opinion. Like, if you're just waking
I'm just
up
doing
for
it
yourself,
by myself, and I'm going around. And if I'm being perfectly honest, what we teach at Echelon Front is infinitely better than what I was doing as a motivational speaker. Not to say what I was doing was bad, but teaching these principles. I mean, Jocko is one of the most unique individuals that has existed, in that he lived it. So he lived leadership. He has been a leader. He has been an awesome leader. In his own world and in his life. So he has the experience. He can create philosophies. He can teach it. He can create the philosophies and tell people how to be a leader. And then not only those two things, but he's done it. He can teach it, and he can create just new, almost never before been thought of, philosophies around it. He can philosophize about it. He can come up with brand new concepts that that just blow people's minds, that it's so simple. Why didn't I think about that before? So we can do all three of those things. And so he's a very unique individual, and that's why there's so many people that are saying what you just said, that what he's taught has been incredibly impactful to their lives and saved their lives in some ways, saved marriages, and just improved people's lives. And so in order to be a part of that team, I am well aware that I'm extremely, extremely, extremely fortunate.
Yeah. I mean, I went to Muster 11 back in Arizona, and just like seeing firsthand experience people who have like little exposure to those principles, or people who have been it, like me. I've been a follower of Jocko since he was on Tim Ferriss, and it's like, just seeing people's, from all aspects of wherever they're at, just like their lives change a little bit, and be like, what, I can take more ownership in my marriage, like you said, or at work, or maybe with my physical health and fitness. It's like, it's all on me. And like I don't think that message is portrayed a lot as much as it should be, in my opinion. But I'm just grateful for people like you and for Jocko for being the ones to get it out there and keep doing what you're doing, because, you know, the world needs more ownership, in my opinion. And especially like if we want to be a successful country, even, like you gotta own up to your mistakes and just who you are and where you can improve, and support other people like you said.
Yeah, man. Totally agree.
But that's kind of all I got for you tonight. Or
Okay.
anything you want to leave the listeners with that, you know, is the Rob Jones philosophy, or anything, you know, you think is really, really important for us to grasp?
Well, my talk that I did at Muster last was own your attitude. And I tell the story about the pirate hat that you were asking me about, and about how the only thing that I could own in that moment when I was laying in a hospital bed was my attitude, because my body wasn't working. And because I did that, because I owned my attitude, I took ownership of how I was going to react to my injury. I was able to help, you know, my mom, the most important person in my life, feel a little bit better. I was able to help her get through the most traumatic experience of her entire life, and then do everything else that we just talked about.
Yeah.
So own your attitude.
Own your attitude. That's perfect. Well,
Thanks,
Rob,
man.
I seriously appreciate you jumping on here, and that invitation for me to buy your ticket to come out and do the Mesa Marathon in February. That's a real thing if you actually want to.
Cool.
Not
I mean, I don't think I'm in.
you.
I'm probably not in marathon shape right now, but maybe one of these upcoming years it'll be fun to try out.
I'd love it. And if
I'm
you're ever in
currently
Salt
training
Lake,
just for health right now. I got a 3-year-old and a baby on the way, so if I can get a good long run in, I'm very lucky.
that was actually my last question I had for you. You got a baby coming this Christmas.
December,
are you up for the challenge? 2 kids.
Yeah, man. Well, I better be. I don't have a choice.
That's true. Yeah. No, that's a good point. But own your attitude, I guess, right?
Yeah, man.
Well, again, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on and sharing your story and your message. And I always tell my listeners to keep getting after it. And with examples like you, it makes it a little bit easier to keep that going. So appreciate all you're doing.
Sure, man. Let me know after you have your first Rob Jones. Let me know what you think.
Hey, sounds good. Yeah, next time you come to Salt Lake, I'll treat you to one.
Sounds good.
All right.